On a rainy night, we see a woman who can barely walk while holding a baby while fleeing from two people chasing her. The woman manages to hide on the outskirts of a house, so she starts singing to the baby to put it to sleep. Just then, the owner of the house comes out and asks the woman what she's doing outside her house. However, when the lady sees the woman's baby, she offers to let them come inside so the baby doesn't get sick. Due to this, the woman agrees, but before entering, she hands the baby to the ladies, saying she's going to buy medicine and will be back soon. As the woman looks at the baby's walnut necklace curiously, the baby's mother disappears without a trace, leaving the baby with a new mother. 18 years later, at the city's fireworks festival, we see a girl asking her brother Lu Shu to buy her some tangulas, which are essentially caramelized fruits. We learn that Lu Shu is none other than our protagonist, who was the baby his mother abandoned when he was young, the one with the walnut necklace. Returning to the girl's request, named Lu Xiaoyu, the protagonist tells her that he can't buy her any snacks because it would prevent them from buying new clothes, and he hesitates to give the money to the vendor, though he eventually does. Later, as they stroll from the festival, Lu Shu overhears people talking about a man who lifted over 2,000 pounds of weight, speculating whether he's a human with superpowers or a fraud. His sister grabs his arm and leads him to a distant performance she spotted. The show features a man breathing fire, but both siblings struggle to see it well due to their height. Lu Xiaoyu suggests that her brother lift her on his shoulders, but he quickly gets tired and lowers her. Then he pulls her forward so she can see the performance better. During this, the man breathing fire triggers a vision in the protagonist's mind where he sees a sword and feels something emanating from his necklace. When he returns to the performance, he's amazed by it, believing it to be an unusual power. After the show, Lu Xiaoyu and Shu Lu wonder how the man performed those tricks. The girl proposes sneaking backstage to ask him personally. They manage to sneak in but witness the performers being shot at by men. Startled, they make noise, alerting the men to their presence. The protagonist lies, saying they were looking for the restroom, while the men claim to be firefighters and that the performance wasn't authorized. Though he pretends to believe them, the protagonist knows they're not telling the truth and they leave. Outside, they encounter a young man named Zhu Wei who asks why they were backstage, but the siblings ignore him and leave. On their way, Lu Shu suspects those men harmed the performer to steal his powers. He asks his sister what she'd do if there were more people with unusual powers in the world than regular ones. She says she becomes stronger than them and protect him since she believes she'll awaken an unusual power, and in return, he just has to feed her. They come across the woman to whom they gave the baby years ago, cooking outside her house. The protagonist inquires about his uncle, and she mentions he's still the same and accustomed to his situation. Lu Xiaoyu interrupts, calling the woman Aunt Lin. The girl asks to try the medicine Aunt Lin is preparing, but Lu Shu hurries her away. At night, Lu Xiaoyu watches the news about people gaining powers. The protagonist heads to the kitchen to make noodles for dinner, but realizes he's out of them. His sister suggests instant noodles, but he refuses, leading her to propose using the walnut necklace to cook. He playfully taps her head with it, causing her to cry, and reluctantly agrees to buy the instant noodles she wants. In the street, he notices it's snowing and reminisces about his time at the orphanage being teased by others. He remembers how Lu Xiaoyu was always there for him, even escaping the orphanage to be with him. While crossing the highway, he collides with a truck. At that moment, he hears his mother's song as his necklace starts to glow. He finds himself on the ground and something in the sky appears. His necklace opens, floats, and breaks the walnut, bathing him in light. When he wakes, he's uninjured, believing he has an unusual power. He gets up, startling the man who hit him, causing him to flee without compensating the protagonist. He buys the instant noodles and frightens the cashier with his blood-covered appearance. At home, he tells Xiaoyu about the accident. She asks if the car is okay, and he heads to the bathroom. Noticing his unscathed body, he sees a glowing mark on his palm. In his room, a menu appears resembling a game interface. It displays names of people he frightened, earning him points. He presses a button for a prize wheel, winning a fruit of purification resembling an apple. As he bites it, a glow spreads through his body, making him feel good. Despite losing subsequent bets, he perseveres. On his last try, he wins a scroll containing a song, his mother's song. As he sings, light travels from the sky, teleporting him to a different universe. Despite this, he continues conversing with Xiaoyu as if he's in his room. Their argument earns him points due to negative emotions. As they finish eating, he feels strange as the news reports a fire. He decides to investigate and sees men hopping across rooftops. He's spotted due to a mistake. As they approach our protagonist, he realizes they are the same men who shot at the performer, so he knows it's not good to be near them. While trying to escape, they discover him, but he conveniently finds a fountain and tells them he was looking for nuts. Since the men don't sense anything unusual about him, they think he's just a normal person and let him go. Back home, the protagonist realizes he can sense them, but they can't sense him. Just then, Xiaoyu appears and he intends to tell her what's happening, but suddenly a person falls into their garden. Lu Shu goes to investigate, with his sister secretly following, generating more negative emotions that earn him more points. They realize the fallen man is the fire performer, so Lu Shu suspects that he has been used to generate the fire. Xiaoyu asks what they'll do with him, and the protagonist suggests they'll ignore him since they can't afford his attention, generating negative feelings in the man. Lu Shu notices the guy is pretending to be unconscious and decides to annoy him to elicit more negativity, hence more income. When the man gets up, he tries to burn Lu Shu, but the fire immediately extinguishes. The fire performer attempts to attack a few more times, but failing, he gives up and asks to leave. Upon leaving, Lu Shu lies to Xiaoyu, claiming the man was weak and that's why he couldn't burn him. Xiaoyu teases him, implying that he's the weak one and won't awaken any superpowers. Lu Shu insists he already awakened one, but she doesn't believe him. However, they get distracted and forget about the matter. In the protagonist's room, he contemplates that he doesn't actually possess any superpowers to show. While exploring the menu, he finds an item in his inventory that materializes when he touches it. He decides to consume it, and a ray transports him back to the universe, where he witnesses his power growing within him. Upon waking, he realizes he's immensely strong. As he goes downstairs, Xiaoyu teases him because his friends are gathering without him. He explains he doesn't have money for it. Nonetheless, he chats with his group and intentionally infuriates them, gaining points along with annoying Xiaoyu. She sends him to sell eggs to make money. The next day, Lu Shu is selling eggs and other merchants inquire about Xiaoyu. He lies that she's sick and prefers staying home. The protagonist notices his classmates ignore him while selling eggs, and an experienced merchant advises him to ignore them. Other classmates, including the class monitor, pass by, and the protagonist, taunting, flips the situation, leaving the monitor to buy all the eggs. The monitor, however, jests about paying the credit card, knowing the protagonist only accepts cash. A girl offers to lend money to the monitor, leaving the boys embarrassed. In class, a classmate talks about a video showing the person responsible for the fire. Lu Shu disregards this and watches a video explaining the levels of awakened individuals, ranging from A to F. He's the lowest level, and F. After the video, he suddenly exclaims that someone has awakened, but it's just a joke to earn more points. Later, a classmate bursts in the classroom, announcing an incident in the 7th class. People are observing scattered objects on the floor. Lu Shu arrives and senses negativity. He learns that a student argued with a teacher and forcefully flung the desk. As another desk falls, he suspects the student is on the terrace and rushes there. However, the girl who lent money to the monitor reappears. On the terrace, a student holds a teacher by the neck, threatening to throw him. Lu Shu views this as a chance to earn more points and enumerates the charges the student will face. His tactics earn points and distract the student, allowing them to catch him and rescue the teacher. Later, the protagonist enters the classroom, where many students are wearing masks for blood tests. He tries to avoid it, but ends up being the first. On his way home, Lu Shu sees Ji Wei talking to his Aunt Mei, warning her not to open the door for strangers. Mi says she'll miss the task. Jie Wei notices Lu Shu and extends his hand, but the protagonist ignores him again. At home, Lu Shu finds out that Xiaoyu is sick with a fever. He thinks the fruit he won with the roulette can help her, and after several attempts, he wins one and gives it to her. She recovers instantly, so he goes for another. Xiaoyu believes he's mocking her, but he gives her more fruit and reassures her. She begins to eat, and Lu Shu teases her, saying she should study and do her tasks. This provokes her anger and earns him more points. The next day, his classmates discuss how the troublemaker from the previous day received minimal punishment. They decide not to give their final exams, advocating for equal judgment. When classes begin, masked hooded men enter to test students with special abilities. Lu Shu's name is called, surprising his classmates. Elsewhere, we see a powerful man confronted by a hooded figure who threatens to kill his last descendant, Lu Shu. The man sends agile people to stop the hooded figure, but they fail. Later, several hooded men in black are seen carrying boxes towards the institution. On the other hand, in the protagonist's class, a new student is introduced. As a result, Shu's desk mate offers the new student a seat, stating that she doesn't want to sit next to him anymore. When the new student approaches Shu, all the classmates start praising him, assuming he's a girl, but he introduces himself to Lu Shu as Yan Shu, clarifying that he's a guy. However, the protagonist only asks him uncomfortable questions to earn points. That night, Shu heads to a building where his selected classmates are gathering. The man he saw earlier as one of the hooded figures explains that he called them there to learn cultivation. He begins by asking if they know what an Isekai is, but noticing that no one does, he simplifies the question by asking if they know what sodium is. A classmate tries to answer, but the man asks Lu Shu to respond. Caught off guard, he seizes the opportunity to gain points, embarrassing himself in the process. The hooded man proceeds to explain that Nikkei is a type of metallic liquid that can detect the interaction between a human's blood and the energy between the sky and the earth, known as quality. One student adds that it's the energy received from the earth. The teacher explains that this quality works with blood and takes on the color of each individual's quality. This allows them to determine which students have powers. After class, a group of students talks negatively about Lu Shu as he passes by, saying he forced his way in since he's the lowest level. However, Yan Shu assures Lu Shu that success requires effort and perseverance. He asks if Shu is bothered by their comments, but he advises him not to get upset about it. Back at home, Xiaoyu is enjoying a large meal while Shu eats one of his fruits to strengthen himself. Suddenly, a menu appears for his power, stating that his purification has reached its maximum power, unlocking a stinky tofu that he gives to his sister. After numerous attempts to summon the stinky tofu, he finally draws a card, which hits Xiaoyu, causing the world to pause and a hole in the sky to open. She is transported to space where she finally awakens. Later, Shu comes up with the brilliant idea to sell the stinky tofu. The next day, the protagonist encounters a man practicing swordplay. The man offers to teach him, but Shu declines and continues on his way. In the town square, Shu successfully sells all this stinky tofu before heading to school. This becomes his routine in the following days, selling tofu and excelling in his classes. One night at home, a walnut appears in front of him, transporting him to a universe where he senses a power emanating from his body, but doesn't yet understand how to decipher it. A radiant purple sword of light appears, which he effortlessly masters. Back in his reality, he realizes he can also wield the sword there, though it exhausts him. He knows that if he masters it, he'll become a genius. The next day at school, classmates discuss the awakened people, a topic taken from an official forum. Shu tells Lu Shu about 3 awakened people who teamed up to rob the central bank. The class monitor interrupts, saying they should join his father's organization to defend the city. He mocks Shu's low quality and calls him poor. In response, Shu says the monitor must be unhappy to say such things, infuriating him and earning more points. On the same night in the cultivation class, Shu tells Lu Shu that the teacher possesses a special rock that aids cultivation. When they receive their final grades for the course, the rock, like the teacher, will help their qualities flourish. Meanwhile, the class monitor is receiving this special rock. He then teaches them how to form a connection between the rock and themselves to enhance their strength tenfold. At home, Shu tries to connect his rock with the sword but fails. He believes the teacher's method is ineffective and doesn't know how to report it. The following day, Shu sees the man practicing with his sword again. As the man approaches, Shu is already walking away, avoiding the offer to learn. At school, Shu asks Shu how he cultivates his rock. He replies that it took him 2 hours of intense concentration, suggesting Shu focus on his physical power. Lu Shu is amazed by Shu's knowledge, causing him to leave the scene embarrassed by the attention. In class, the class monitor showcases his superior strength, justifying it as his normal power. When Lu Shu enters, the class monitor invites him to a strength competition. Shu easily wins, ridicules the monitor, and claims his victory awakened his strength, leading everyone to leave. During lunch, Shu is eating stinky tofu when Shu arrives. He mentions hearing that Lu Shu is one of the awakened, but Shu makes light of it, saying his newfound strength is due to his morning exercises. Shu suggests that they inform the teacher, thinking it might help with their rock cultivation. However, Shu suspects the teacher is part of his secret department and that it's a trap to abduct the awakened. At night, Shu senses hooded figures approaching his neighborhood. One of them approaches the sword-wielding man's door, introducing himself as Tan Lo, while the man introduces himself as Lai. Li apologizes for not inviting him in and offers him tea. Tan Lo explains that he needs the man to join his group due to the ongoing wars and his role as the last successor. However, Lai declines, stating that they cannot control any country and would be easily defeated. Tan Lo departs, hoping that their next encounter won't be as enemies. He notices Shu at the window, but ignores him. Xiaoyu asks if Shu knows who he is, to which he replies that he's a powerful B-level individual. The next day, Lai is seen training with his sword until Shu approaches and expresses his desire to learn, finding it challenging. Lai assures him that he'll assist if he encounters difficulties. Shu calls for her sister and surprises both of them by suggesting she practice with the sword at Lai's house in the afternoons. At school, Shu mentions that 3 awakened individuals joined forces to commit crimes, while the protagonist receives 3 notifications of points earned through anger. After class, Lu Shu leaves the school and overhears a conversation about his classmate Qin Si, who has successfully connected her rocks and achieved strong cultivation, making her the first to do so. On his way home, the protagonist sees Xiaoyu arguing with Mr. Li about a math problem. Shu suggests that in the future, Mr. Lai could help her with her homework. Mr. Lai then tells Shu that it's time to start his training. Initially, he suggests using weights, but Shu wants to master the connection between his rock and cultivation. Mr. Lai mentions Xu Jin, who mastered that cultivation by learning to control a sword. So the protagonist grabs one of the weights, which weighs 300 kilograms, and finds it incredibly light, revealing he's awakened his strength. As a result, Mr. Lai takes out a leaf that ignites with blue flames and tells Shu he will teach him something new. Using a fiery leaf as a sword, he cuts through a wall, explaining that there's much to learn. He hands Shu a sword and asks him to demonstrate his moves. They begin training and the protagonist masters each move. At night, Mr. Lai explains that the most powerful person is the one willing to take on great responsibility. He asks Shu if he would be willing to do so. However, Shu declines, saying he has other responsibilities. Mr. Li understands and says he'll continue teaching, but with a very personal condition. The next day, Aunt Mai is chatting with Mr. Lai, who is teaching math to Xiaoyu. A man introduces himself as Su Jin. Lu Shu senses that someone is approaching Mr. Li and his sister, prompting him to run out of school and toward them. He arrives to find Mr. Lai with Su Jin, who suggests that Mr. Li join his group, but Mr. Lai refuses. After Su Jin leaves, Mr. Lai gives the protagonist vials containing NAC so they can determine their qualities. Back at home, Shu analyzes the Nikkei and his quality changes to black, initially making him think he's at the highest level. However, it changes again, resembling his star chart, making him wonder if it's a higher level than normal. Leaving the house, he encounters Mr. Lai and informs him that he's at a high level. Mr. Lai looks at him and walks away. We now shift to the protagonist's room, where he enters a state of hypnosis, progressing to the next star level and gaining the power of regeneration. Meanwhile, Xiaoyu dreams of being thrown into a black hole. Just then, Lu Shu enters her room and is startled by her strange behavior. She awakens from the trance and tells him she passed the first star level. Curious, Shu asks about her specialization, and she explains that she can summon dead animals and command them. Shu requests a demonstration, so she summons a dead ant and later a dead bird in the yard. Shu believes she gained this power when the scroll opened that day. Xiaoyu expresses a desire to practice with larger animals, so Shu takes her to a pit, but she believes he's playing a trick on her and gets angry. Back at home, the girl successfully summons the pig she saw earlier, but Shu knocks it down and hurts it to test whether it reacts like a real one. Realizing it does, Lu Shu uses his power to summon the sword, frightening the pig. As he eliminates the pig, he gains another level, leaving Xiaoyu angry. That night, the news reports more deaths related to criminal awakened individuals. Meanwhile, Shu is having dinner with Xiaoyu when he suddenly senses something related to awakened individuals on a bridge. They decide to go and see what's happening. Meanwhile, the group of hooded individuals is confronting the awakened individuals with superpowers on a bridge. Suddenly, they are saved by the arrival of the police as they were unable to defeat the hooded attackers. Seeing this, Shu tells Xiaoyu to go home, and though she initially asks to accompany him, she eventually leaves when he insists. In that moment, the protagonist pieces together the events, discovering that the hooded individuals raided a residence where awakened individuals gather and realizing that these hooded individuals are called the Celestial Network. A police officer enters the residence but is attacked by the awakened individuals who attempt to escape. Suddenly, a boy from the Celestial Network manages to stop the officer by impaling him with a sword. However, this doesn't deter the largest awakened individual. As the smoke clears around the formidable awakened individual, they spot the protagonist, attempting unsuccessfully to capture him. While some try to capture the awakened individual, Lu Shu is struggling to avoid being caught himself. When he succeeds, he witnesses another fight in which everyone attacks a particularly powerful awakened individual, but their efforts are in vain due to its extreme strength. At the end of the battle, the strong awakened individual crosses paths with the protagonist. Lu Shu activates his power field and attacks, drawing power from his sword and overpowering the awakened individual. He then escapes the scene. Upon returning home, he deactivated his power field, and Xiaoyu sees that he emerged from the fight unscathed. Both of them leave the house to investigate further, but they encounter Mr. Lai. They inform him that they're going to grab a meal. The two traverse rooftops, and Shu asks his sister to activate her sparrow to keep watch and alert them to any issues. However, she reports nothing amiss, so they decide to inspect the location of the previous fight. Once there, the protagonist asks Xiaoyu if she can sense the energy of those who died there, and she confirms that she can. With this confirmation, Lu Shu asks his sister to absorb the energy of the powerful awakened individual and materialize it. She begins to use her power, but it turns out she doesn't have enough energy to materialize it. Having failed in their mission, Xiaoyu asks to be taken out to eat since they already told Mr. Lai they would. They can't return home on empty stomachs. At the restaurant, Shu advises her not to let anyone see her qualities or powers. He also tells her that if she had stayed at the orphanage, she might have had a better life. This causes the girl to cry, thinking that he intends to send her back to the orphanage. He reassures her that it's not true and promises to do everything he can to get their own place so they won't have to worry about anything. The next day, Su Jin talks to another man about the previous day's confrontation, wondering who the young man was that faced and defeated the powerful awakened individual. Following this, the entire Celestial Network convenes for a meeting. They discuss that this mysterious figure must be found as they manage to defeat the entire network. They speculate that if it's a young boy, he has a promising future ahead. We transition to Lu Shu's stand where he's selling the pungent tofu, causing long lines and frustration due to the slow service. When it's finally sold out, a man approaches him to buy more. However, as he doesn't have more, he refuses, leading the customer to become angry and earning the protagonist more points. In the evening, we see a man taking out savings from various places and leaving his wife's room. At Lu Shu's house, Xiaoyu wakes up to show the protagonist that she was able to create the man he defeated. However, this startles Shu because he thought it was real, and then he asks if she can control her powers. The girl tells him that she can, but he warns her not to do it in the house because it's not theirs. Due to this, she reveals that she can see the man's memories and knows where the stolen money is. She wants to go retrieve the money, but Shu scolds her, telling her that it should be returned to the police since it's not theirs. However, she tells him that with that money, they could buy a house and they wouldn't have to go back to the orphanage. Shu explains that's not the right way and that he's saving money to do that, and she nods and goes to sleep. The next morning, their classmates murmur about the awakened confrontation with the Celestial Network, but Shu appears and tells them not to waste their time. His classmate Yayan Shu realizes that he doesn't seem to get along well with other people. Lu Shu asks Yayan Shu about blessed land, and he explains that it's a place where they harvest powers like qualities and is beneficial for practitioners. He also mentions the option of spiritual stones, which are only given by the Celestial Network. On the other hand, the Celestial Network is shown facing many awakened individuals and managing to escape from them. At school, all the students gather in the courtyard to welcome the new school director. Suddenly, Shu sees an old man leaving the school, encountering Lu Xiaoyu, the new director. The new director informs him that he received news about the stolen money because someone reported it, but he tells Shu to keep it a secret. He assures Shu that he'll visit the school. Upon entering the school, Lu Xiaoyu hesitates to go on stage because he's eager to retrieve his stolen money. Eventually, he does take the stage and addresses the students. Later, it's revealed that this new director will be in charge of the group of those with a different training like Lu Shu. They explain that they will receive monthly cultivation resources, namely spiritual stones. The allocation depends on their levels, and as an auto-awakened individual, Lu Shu will receive 2 of them. After the class ends, Lu Shu approaches his classmate Yayan Shu and asks him about the price of the stones to learn more about them. Yayan Shu offers to help him sell them on the black market, as selling them is prohibited. He gives his spiritual stones to Yayan Shu to sell and then leaves school. On his way home, the protagonist thinks about how happy it will make his sister to know that they'll finally be able to buy a house. However, at home, he finds Xiaoyu and Mr. Lai studying with Aunt Mei, while someone is spying on them. Later that same day, Lu Xiaoyu, the friend who was spying, informs Mr. Lai that there are people planning an attack, but only their skeletons were found. Mr. Lai assures him that no one will touch any ruins in the city, so he shouldn't worry. Nevertheless, he mentions that there's a person using a sword to attack others, but Mr. Lai dismisses the possibility that it was one of their own. Finally, arriving home, he shows to his sister an envelope and gives her a phone so that they can communicate. He reveals that they can now buy the house, leaving the girl stunned. She bursts into tears of joy. Later, Lu Shu is seen in his room meditating until he witnesses a new power and strength developing within him. The same can be observed happening in Xiaoyu's room. The following day, the protagonist is at his stand when someone asks about the tofu. He initially says it's not for sale and is only for display. However, he realizes that it's the director who's asking, so he agrees to sell it. Lu Xiaoyu recognizes him as a student and asks for it for free, but another merchant informs the director that Lu Shu is an average student working to pay for school and take care of his sister. The director is moved and offers him money, but Lu Shu declines, stating it's not the honest way. In the afternoon, the protagonist receives a call from one of his classmates saying that they should be at the bus stop by 7, so he sends a message to Xiaoyu to reassure her. On the bus, Yayan Shu tells everyone that they are going to some ruins but won't enter them since they will be in charge of the external security. He explains that the ruins are of extraterrestrial origin and are considered a sacred place where the Matrix Eye is located, the most important object in a ruin. He also shares with the protagonist how his country managed to open one of the ruins a long time ago, obtaining its Matrix Eye, which is a sword now in the hands of a Tian Lu. Later, they arrive at a camp where the purpose is for them to uncover the information that was preserved in those places. After this, everyone goes to eat, but once again, the delegate mocks Lu Shu's poverty, which Lu Shu ignores. While everyone enjoys their meal, a man with a bad attitude arrives looking for a seat on a bench, so the protagonist stands up and slaps him since he dislikes the man's attitude. The protagonist returns to his seat, but then the leader arrives and asks who is responsible, yet nobody says anything and they take the unconscious man away. Yayan Shu asks why he did it, to which Shu responds that the person was very annoying. The conversation eventually shifts and Yayan Shu tells the protagonist that the ruins are the best place to practice, so he proposes they do just that. Later, Lu Shu leaves one of the tents to practice. However, he notices a man looking at the mountains, realizing that he no longer needs to sing to practice. He returns to the tent again and seeks out his classmate Lai to annoy him, earning more points in the process. The next day, the protagonist checks how many points he has earned and how much he has progressed in level. However, when he tries to send a message to his sister, he realizes he has no signal. While going to eat, he receives 2 extra portions of chicken and is offered a seat, surprising all of his classmates. Despite this, he declines, preferring to be with his friend. As night falls, Lu Shu continues his mission to annoy Delegate Lai to earn more coins from him. However, Delegate Lai manages to escape by going to the top of the forest. Nevertheless, the protagonist manages to chase him, and that's how he spends the rest of the day. The next morning, behind a container, Shu prepares to practice his new power to become stronger. Later that same day, we see how all the students are friendly with the protagonist and even give up their place so he can receive his food first. At that moment, Deliot Lee appears, saying he wants to compete against Lu Shu again, this time in a fight. However, the supervisor interrupts them and says if they're going to compete, it should be through strength. Thus, the battle between Lai and Lu Shu begins again, with the protagonist winning once more. He also competes against the supervisor and wins effortlessly. After this, the protagonist and his friend are surprised to see mist emanating from the ruins, not knowing what it could be. Suddenly, a siren starts blaring, indicating they should evacuate since they'll get trapped if they stay. After this, they realize the mist is rapidly approaching them, and even though they try to run, they can't escape it. The protagonist gets caught by the mist and unknowingly falls into the ruins. Suddenly, a skeleton appears and throws an axe at the protagonist, who defends himself quickly. Although he manages to split the skeleton in two, it keeps moving, so he has to decapitate it. Seeing that this works, he takes the axe and starts to explore. While Lu Shu observes the vast ruins, many corpses rise from the ground to attack him, but since they're slow, he manages to get away. As he's leaving, he sees a group of monsters attacking his classmates. Seeing that none of the other students want to do anything to save their friend, Shu heads towards them and manages to attack each monster before they continue to harm his classmates. Once done, the protagonist tells them it's better to keep moving since the place isn't safe. However, they want to stay with Lu Shu to be protected by him. Still, the protagonist leaves them the axe and goes on to help others. We see how several of these axe-wielding zombies are attacking Lu Shu, although they are defeated one by one. After this, the protagonist thinks he should find shelter because it's getting late, so he continues on his path without finding anything, only seeing more dead bodies around. Suddenly, he spots a shining light in the sky and without hesitation shoots it down. Upon seeing where the light came from, he realizes a man launched a flare, which is a signal given in case of getting lost so that the celestial network can locate him. Lu Shu approaches the man and tries to earn more points from him, so he lies about his name and tells him he's called Lai Liu. The man asks to see his sword, so the protagonist agrees but then refuses. This sets off a game of annoyance between them. The man wants to find an exit, but Lu Shu doesn't let him go alone as he wants to keep bothering him, thinking he might be a spy. The man turns out to be very fast and tries to tire Lu Shu out, but he fails. Suddenly, they hear and notice a large horde of zombies approaching them, prompting the protagonist to run away, deceiving and leaving the man behind. The man catches up and initially wants to attack Lu Shu out of anger, but then calms down, and they continue on the path together. When they reach the top of a mountain, Lu Shu asks the man if he's not planning to sleep, and the man denies it. However, the protagonist tells him he's going to meditate and assigns him the mission of keeping watch. So Lu Shu pretends to fall asleep as soon as he closes his eyes, and as the man attempts to steal his sword, Lu Shu suddenly opens his eyes and says he's done sleeping. The next day, Shu is very hungry, so he lies to the man, saying he's going to the bathroom. But actually, he goes to retrieve and eat the smelly tofu. Once done, he decides to surprise the man with a piece of tofu, but before giving it to him, he explains where the tofu comes from and lists all the possible foods he could have brought. This frustrates the man, who doesn't hesitate to attack Lu Shu, but the protagonist counters and defeats him. The protagonist continues his journey and reaches a forest where he finds an apple tree. He takes a few apples to eat, but the squirrels there start attacking him since they don't want him to steal their apples. Nevertheless, he manages to take a couple and escape. Back in the desert again, Lu Shu finds a water path, so he doesn't hesitate to take a drink and rest, realizing the journey is too long. However, as he's about to leave, a pack of wolves appears and chases him. They manage to injure his arm, but he immediately heals by eating a fruit from his roulette. As he continues to escape from the wolves, he comes up with an idea to throw his shoes, allowing him to run even faster until he escapes and reaches the group of students he had helped. Seeing him, they ask if he came alone, and when he says yes, they assume he must be very powerful and should stay with them. However, he tells them he'll only rest for the night and then leave. After this, Lu Shu starts eating the apples he collected in front of them, making them crave the food, which earns him more points. Due to this, the students prepare to revolt so the protagonist would share his apples, but out of fear, they drop an axe, and the protagonist picks it up to continue on his way. As Lu Shu walks, he is attacked by a female zombie who is mounted on a horse and wields a lance. Seeing that her weapon is quite nice, he decides to take it for himself. However, many horse-riding monsters are approaching him, so he pushes the rider off her horse to take her lance and then runs away. The other mounted monsters shoot arrows at him, but they all miss. The group of mounted monsters continues on their path, and some people from the camp are watching them. They believe they've identified the leader of the zombie group since he doesn't carry a lance like the others. In response, they prepare and attack the zombie with a sniper, but they realize he's not the leader as his death doesn't affect them. Then they start shooting arrows at the group, causing them to scatter. They hide and wonder why the particular zombie didn't have a lance like the rest. Suddenly, they see Lu Shu attacking one of the riders, stealing his lance and escaping the arrows unscathed. This surprises everyone, and they speculate that he must belong to a higher level class. Meanwhile, Lu Shu climbs up a tree because he's quite tired. He remembers how he used to hide in trees during hide-and-seek games at the orphanage, and Xiaoyu was the only one who knew where he hid. Returning to the present, the protagonist considers that he could exchange the lances for magical stones to sell. Suddenly, he realizes he's surrounded by another group of mounted monsters. Despite feeling confident, he starts facing them one by one and manages to defeat them all. On the other hand, the girl is at home looking for something to eat when she finds some chips. However, they have a note from the protagonist, so she decides to wait for her brother to return before eating them, and she puts them away. Back in the ruins, the group of teachers and students are searching for Lu Shu. They find the remains of the riders defeated by him. Realizing his strength, they think he should join their group to help defeat the zombies. Suddenly, they receive information that another group of riders is chasing someone. They come up with a plan to deal with them. Returning to Lu Shu, he climbs a hill to concentrate and practice his power. Since he has earned a lot of points, he decides to eat a flower that regenerates him and increases his power. On the other hand, the group of teachers is spying on the riders to initiate their plan. However, before they can start, they see several lances falling from above, killing several of the zombies. Lu Shu appears and starts attacking the remaining monsters with all the weapons at his disposal, killing them all without assistance. Seeing this, the students and teachers approach him, and Lu Shu clarifies that all these weapons belong to him. The protagonist starts collecting all the lances from the defeated riders until someone asks if he's Lu Shu. He confirms it but tells them he doesn't want them to take his lances. They reassure him not to worry about that. Lu Shu then starts selling his weapons, but since no one has money to buy them, he ends up trading with several people. After this, they all set out on the journey again, following the protagonist this time, who's singing a song. The deeper they go into the ruins, the colder they feel. Lu Shu asks the leader if there were many casualties, and he says that only members of the Red Flame Network died, sacrificing themselves to save the students. Hours pass, and they decide to camp to rest. Here, the protagonist starts handing out apple slices to his group, relieving their thirst and hunger. Seeing this, a man approaches Lu Shu and offers him a watch in exchange for 3 apples so he can distribute them to other groups. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind extinguishes the campfires and demonic spirits appear, causing Lu Shu's inner sword to react. When a ghost tries to attack, it senses Lu Shu's presence, sees him as a monster, gets scared, and the ghosts disappear. After that, they finally reach the center of the ruins, where they encounter several groups of people who say they were helped by King Si, the protagonist's mysterious companion. Lu Shu doesn't pay much attention to this and starts selling his lances again, claiming they are for training. However, this is interrupted when he and his companion, King Si, are called by the teachers for being the top students. Due to their exceptional abilities, they are recruited to assist the Red Flame Network. Then, a supervisor approaches a circle in the same ruin and thrusts a sword from his heart into the ground to check the depth of the cave, clarifying that it's a bit deep and they need to wait. After this, Lu Shu checks his power menu and realizes there are 9 spies among them, but he's not concerned. Suddenly, an explosion is heard and they see a tree fall, from which the director emerges, whom they thought was already dead. They collect several fruits from the tree and distribute them to everyone. At that moment, Yan Shu appears and runs towards Lu Shu, who is delighted to see him well. They chat for a while about what they had been doing during this time until Lu Shu gives Yan Shu one of his lances as a gift. This is witnessed by a group of people, and a man from that group approaches the protagonist, asking for a lance and promising to pay him later. However, Lu Shu realizes he's a spy and declines. After this, the director speaks to everyone and informs them that the next day they will all enter the depths of the ruin where they will face challenges and have to use their strength. As night falls, everyone goes to sleep except the protagonist, who is navigating through his power menu. Suddenly, several spies take advantage of this moment to rush towards the entrance of the cave, but Lu Shu manages to stop one of them, the same person who had asked him for a lance earlier. The protagonist sees this opportunity and demanded that whatever the person finds down there, he will have to give 70% of it to him. The person refuses, and a fight ensues. The main manages to dodge the traitor's attack, and suddenly he shouts loudly to wake everyone up. The director hears this and immediately attacks him, throwing him into the pit. All of this was part of the director's plan to uncover the spies, so he decides that they should enter the hole that night to retrieve the Matrix Eye and protect it. Afterward, the director asks his companions to gather the entire team for the descent, including the standout students, while the others stay above to guard and protect the rest of the students. With all the troops ready, they provide recommendations on how to take care and use their wits to attack. Later, the director approaches the protagonist upon noticing he has a lot of jewels with him, so he asks if he can have some. As Lu Shu refuses, the man suggests that they could do business together, offering him protection, wisdom, and the opportunity to explore various ruins in exchange for watches. However, the director becomes annoyed as he realizes that the protagonist has enough money and doesn't need to descend into the pit. He suggests they split whatever they find inside the hole equally. Finally, a girl from the Red Flame Network creates a ladder for them to descend, beginning their mission. Halfway through, the cave emits a green light, triggering Lu Shu's inner sword to ignite, but he stops it. Upon reaching the end of the path, they find the traitors sitting there, who were already dead. However, they don't pay them much attention and keep advancing. Upon reaching the bottom of the cave, they encounter a sort of temple, from which thousands of ghosts emerge ready to attack them. Thus, the battle against them begins, but no entity dares to touch the protagonist as his sword is suppressing them, causing all of them to be scared and absorbed by his inner weapon. Suddenly, one of the traitors appears as a spirit, attacking everyone present. This spirit possesses a dark energy apparently absorbed from his companions. The group gathers to decide what to do with this spy's ghost, while he, invisible, attacks Lu Shu. Thanks to his inner sword, the protagonist senses the attack and defends himself using his lance. Everyone is surprised to see this, and they ask him how he did it, though he replies that it was just luck. No one believes his words, and as he doesn't want to reveal more about his power, he randomly points to a spot for the director to shoot at. Surprisingly, the fireball manages to hurt the ghost. But as the protagonist was joking, he starts pointing to various random places, yet he continues to hit the target. Suddenly, thousands of zombie warriors emerge from the temple and move toward them to kill them. Thus, a grand battle begins where the director fights the leader, while the students and teachers fight the other zombies. Lu Shu starts killing a few, but he gets distracted and doesn't notice an arrow coming his way. Luckily, his companion, King Si, saves him and continues the fight. Since nobody wants to get close to the protagonist, he seizes the opportunity to enter the temple and search for something valuable. Lu Shu enters the temple, and thanks to his power, he realizes how furious his sister Xiaoyu is. In this distraction, the ghost of the spy appears behind him and attacks him. Almost instinctively, Lu Shu's sword comes out and defends him, pushing the ghost out and earning more points. After this, Shu opens the door to a room where there are several clay soldiers. Lu Shu enters the place without a second thought, and upon seeing the clay soldiers, he doesn't hesitate to take their spears. However, all these soldiers come back to life and prepare to attack the protagonist. He draws his inner sword, causing everyone to be frightened and return to their positions. Fueled by the soldiers' anger, the protagonist starts taking their spears and earns coins from their frustration. Meanwhile, the group continues to battle against the zombies, although they are at a disadvantage. However, King Si, the companion, is helping to defeat almost all the zombies, while the director is struggling against the leader. Just when things seem dire for the director, he manages to deceive the leader and obtain the power spear, which turns out not to be the Matrix Eye. On the other hand, Shu encounters several items on an altar. The ghost leader senses this and stops fighting the director, running back to the temple. The director doesn't hesitate to follow him until he reaches where the protagonist is. However, the clay soldiers, under their leader's orders, stop him. Further inside the temple, the ghost leader confronts Lu Shu, who is holding the seal of the ruin in his hands. Accidentally dropping it, he tries to catch it, but the Matrix Eye enters his body, causing the place, like everything else, to start fading away. The protagonist is left alone in space until he eventually fades too, being transported back to the camp, restoring everything to how it was when they arrived, with all the students and teachers alive. After this, Yayan Shu is seen searching everywhere for his friends, but without success. Meanwhile, the director talks to the head of the Red Flame Network, indicating that the seal was probably taken by one of the spies, so they are still searching for it. On another note, one of the teachers is in a store collecting all the weapons the students obtained inside the ruin. Yayan Shu arrives and informs him that the protagonist is missing. Everyone becomes concerned, but suddenly Lu Shu enters the store safe and sound. He cuts in line to deliver the weapons first, claiming he has an emergency and needs to go home. On his way home, Lu Shu receives notifications of the anger Xiaoyu is feeling. Suddenly, he notices several potato chip wrappers on the ground and looks up to see his sister on a tree. She immediately comes down to check if he's okay, and then bursts into tears out of concern. Lu Shu tells her they need to go home. As they walk, he shows her the money he earned. Since she's still mad at him, he promises to take her out to eat, bringing a smile to her face. Outside their home, Aunt May and Mr. Lai are waiting for them, relieved that they've returned safe and sound. Inside their house, Lu Shu asks his sister to manifest the man she absorbed again. When she does, she asks why, and he shows her two orbs inside himself, one dark and one clear. He explains that the dark one nourishes the body and soul, while the clear one provides strength to defeat enemies. He gives the dark orb to the illusion created by his sister, but it starts laughing, indicating his experiment was a failure. Xiaoyu becomes upset that it was useless, so Lu Shu gives her the fruits he collected in the ruin. She happily starts eating the fruit, but suddenly the squirrel that owned the tree from which the fruit came appears, starting a fight with her. She finds it cute and decides to give the squirrel a name. She also offers her potato chips in exchange for the squirrel's obedience. Later in his ruin, Lu Shu looks at the seal, being spiritually transported to the sky's peak, where he can see the entire city. Realizing he can control the power emanating from the city, he snaps out of the trance. Turning the seal over, he discovers another function. He's transported to another place where he sees the spears he collected. He also spots a large door containing the temple of the ruin. He realizes that if he has the ability, he can reopen the ruin. However, his trance is interrupted by his sister, who is quite scared, thinking something happened to him. He wakes up and reassures her, telling her that their lives will be different from now on. With a bit of money, he plans to do various things for both of them. On another front, the leader of the Red Flame Network discusses the seal with a colleague, indicating that a spy has it and they're investigating why it hasn't been activated yet. The other man adds that they'll be alert to any unusual energy and that they'll change the special class's curriculum to include only those capable of facing stronger dangers, as there will always be wars in the world. Meanwhile, Lu Shu and Lu Xiaoyu are watching fireworks, happy about everything they've achieved.